Welcome to the Moringa School podcast. My name is Michelle, and today we'd like to continue with our daily tech talks and everything that we can do to make our society better. So I'm joined today by a few of my friends. I'd like them to introduce themselves.
Hi guys, my name is Melissa. Welcome again.
Hi guys, it's Kevin. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hi, it's Victor again here. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi guys, my name is Eugene. Welcome to the Moringa podcast.
So Eugene is new here, so maybe we'd like to introduce him. Maybe he'd like to introduce himself and maybe tells us what he does. And yeah.
So I'm a full stack developer, a graduate of Moringa School. I also studied finance and project management, and some of my interests are finance, economics, geopolitics, a bit of history, and seeing how all of that fits in together and works together.
So I think today we have a relevant guest, Eugene. My words fail me, but today we are going to talk about this week. A tech startup called Andela was able to raise $100 million in VC funding, and we'd just like to know what they did or what they are doing or what we ourselves can do to also get such funding in order to maybe boost our projects, boost our startups, and maybe ways we can do better in order to create good products in our society. So maybe I'll open the floor to anyone who wants to start as to what they think about this Andela funding. Anyone?
I think it's good. I was reading somewhere that they plan to hire over 1,000 developers this year.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the fact that they're creating employment opportunities in Africa where, we have about maybe 60% of the youth who are unemployed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think it's a good step forward. What do you guys think?
For me personally, I think the upside of it is giving an opportunity to Africans to work at global level standards and have access to teams and ideas and technology used by global level tech companies. So it actually widens the scope of locals in terms of using tech and applying that tech, because it's one thing to know about tech and it's another thing to actually see how people are using it in different countries at a very advanced level. So getting access to that, I think there'll be sort of trickle down effect in our local spaces.
Yeah, so do you think that Andela being a startup, less than maybe 10 years in Africa, do we think that their business practices have made them more attractive to VC funds, or what do you think has made them attractive to people who want to maybe fund such projects? What do you think?
I think as long as you're producing a quality product, it's not difficult to raise funding, right? Mm-hmm. So people in Andela go through a very selective process. And then through that, you go through like a 4-year contract. For those who don't know, a 4-year contract where you work remotely with American companies. So I think the timing and the selection process, you end up churning out quality developers. So I think by the time you're pitching to venture capitalists on why you should scale up as a startup, it's much easier to gain funding. So maybe as a point to entrepreneurs operating in Africa, you really have to ask yourself the question, what is your product? Is it solving a problem? In this case, there's a gap of software developers globally, right? So the fact that they're bridging that, I think, makes it easier to raise funding. Is your product good? Are you solving a problem? Yeah.
I also think, to add on that, the aspect of quality and the problem, I think the ethos behind your company will also influence your ability to raise funds and your ability to resonate with other people. Like, for example, for Andela, one of the main things is to have distributed teams. And since the way in which people are working is evolving and will change over time, it will be mainly remote based. So I think that also influenced greatly the ability to get funding, because like the company that led the latest round of funding, mainly focuses on investing in sustainable companies. And for them, the fact that Andela was contributing to remote work and distributed teams, it meant that there will be less of an impact in terms of carbon emissions, in terms of traveling and commuting from work and whatnot. So to them, that it fit the criteria of companies to invest in. So I think also knowing exactly other than the financial aspect or the product aspect of your business, knowing like a grander purpose in which your business is contributing towards can also help you target or determine from where you can get your funding, because if you're more inclined to get funding from a source whose funding decisions are driven by a certain philosophy that you fit in, or that.
Oh yeah, so what you're trying to say, what I've gotten from what you said, is that venture capitalists themselves, they have portfolios on which industry they are particular to, and what
decision drivers that drive their investment.
Oh yeah. Okay. So maybe what I can ask towards that is, maybe as a software developer who's maybe looking to freelance or starting their own business, do you think that we are good entrepreneurs in ourselves in Africa, or do we just create products that are not, they're just going to give us a bit of money and then they're not either solving problems or creating a better environment? Or do you think that us as entrepreneurs in Africa are creating products that are going to help us in the long run?
I think sometimes it's good to deconstruct what entrepreneurship is.
Yeah.
So if you look at entrepreneurship theory, you'll find that there are necessity-motivated entrepreneurs and there are opportunity-motivated entrepreneurs. So I feel like in Africa, from what I've observed, is that a lot of people are entrepreneurs out of necessity, not because they've spotted an opportunity and they can gain funding for that. So you'll find that people are entrepreneurs, especially women, are entrepreneurs in order to feed their families, in order to just get by day, and not necessarily as a long-term plan or as a 20-year, 30-year, sort of plan to scale or to generate lots of revenue, right? So what are your thoughts on that?
I love what Andela have done. Just to bring it back to the topic we were talking about earlier, I think it's a model that we can learn from, because
would you say that they are opportunity motivated entrepreneurs? So it's not necessarily, but at the same time it's a necessity, right? Like filling the gap of software developers. The fact that there's a lack of, I would argue, affordable software developers, maybe they're driven by both necessity and opportunity.
But you see, the necessity is on a larger scale. You see, the necessity for most small business owners in Africa and in Kenya in particular is just local needs, personal needs, to feed your family, to pay the rent, needs that are within. But the necessity for Andela was to actually fill a gap in the industry, which on the other hand, it can be seen as an opportunity. So I think you can simply say it's an opportunity-driven entrepreneurship. They literally feel there's, like, for instance, I read an article once that there's a shortage of 2 million software developers in the United States alone.
Wow.
That's the number of software developers that can be added to that industry, and it still remains sustainable without flooding. So you see, like, the fact that Andela's found a way to fill that space in a very cheaper scale. I also read somewhere, Melissa here shared an article where the average compensation for a decent software developer in the United States is somewhere between that's $150,000 to $400,000.
Yeah.
The same case in Kenya. In Africa, the average compensation for a decent software developer will be, somewhere between $600 to $1,000 at best. Yeah,
that's when you're
best
well
case
paid.
scenario, when you're really well paid. So if you look at that, you see that Andela really sort of nailed it in terms of finding opportunity and filling the market from both aspects, in terms of supplying software developers, and also at a much lower compensation wages, in terms of wages. So I think, like, in terms of nailing entrepreneurship, they got it right.
Yeah, they just do the basics really well.
Yeah, they do the
So
basics
according
very well.
to like a book I was reading recently, we just need to do one of three things much better by several orders of magnitude. Do something better, do something faster, or do something cheaper.
Yeah.
So by dropping the price of a developer from maybe $4,000 a month to around, let's say,
1,600.
around 1,000, so you completely wipe out the competition and the rates that they're offering. So I think just starting from getting the basics of entrepreneurship right is where we need to start. So Eugene, what do you think are some of the things we need to start doing a bit better?
Yeah.
What do you think are some of the things we can start to do better so we can solve problems more effectively and raise this funding?
Some of the things the business or an entrepreneur can do
Yeah.
to raise funding effectively.
Yeah, just to start out, like we were speaking about earlier, just getting the basics of entrepreneurship right. Yeah. So what do you guys think are some of the things we can begin to start doing, in addition to just waiting for venture capitalists to start discovering African companies and African-run companies? What do you think we can do from the side of like entrepreneurs? What do you think we can start to do, like small steps we can take?
I think the first step will be to learn the art of looking at the bigger picture. It's something that African entrepreneurs really lack. We look at entrepreneurship in terms of how it's going to help me and mine, but we don't think about how we can partner with a friend and another one and another one and another one, and share the load, share the responsibilities for this company, raise funding together and build one thing that's really, really big. We were talking about earlier, and we came to the conclusion of culture, where Africans really value ownership, and we were discussing and asking, like, is it better to own ownership of a small company or part ownership of a very big one? And I feel like Africans need to understand that owning part of something bigger at the end of the day is much better than owning everything of something small. And once we understand that, I feel like we will be able to change how we run businesses. And if you partner with someone who has this amount of money, and almost always, everyone has their own experiences. Apart from the benefit of funding, you'll also get the benefit of what's the word I'm looking for? Akili. Intellect, yes. Intellect and knowledge and the expertise, yes. Those are the words that I was looking for. Okay, so you realize, you'll find that if we can partner with other people and they bring their finances and expertise, it will be much easier to grow a great business that is an entrepreneurial business, because you'll have so much money, so much expertise, so much connections. In basically, it will be so much of everything, and in terms you can just grow a very, very big company.
The aspect of networks, it reminded me about how Andela actually started. There were two businesses. So the Nigerian, is it Adoyeji or something, who had a learning startup called Fora. And then there was this other guy with another startup in Nigeria also. So they came together to see how they had. I think Fora had a problem, and Adeweji approached this other founder to see if they could work together to solve something. And the guy called Jonathan, I don't know if he's the current CEO. So he was to come on just as a founder, but ended up being the CEO actually as the current CEO. So I think it actually builds on what you're saying about creating networks in that ecosystem. You'll get expertise, you'll get access to either capital or other forms of advice that you need that wouldn't have been accessible to you, or you wouldn't even have known about. So I think that's really important.
That actually, I just thought of a very critical thing that I've seen this in other countries, where there's a culture where VCs actually don't wait for businesses to come to them, but they constantly monitor the businesses in the industry, and sometimes they can spot two businesses that will work together and they motivate merging.
Yes.
Do you feel like bringing up the culture of mergers in Africa would promote, will motivate VCs to fund more? Do you think it could work?
It will be better, yes, because actually it increases efficiencies, and actually you have two different teams who are basically solving the same problem.
Yeah.
So it actually brings like double the brain power to direct it towards a single problem.
Yes.
But I think a problem that will exist in Africa, like you said, the thing of owning something,
Wanting to own everything.
Yeah, everything.
Yes.
Of nothing, of something small, and thinking that you could actually do it on your own. So that is maybe a hurdle that the cultural aspect now that becomes a problem.
Yeah, I think I can add a point onto that. There's this company, it's called Soul Cycle. I think you've heard of it. So it started with 2 women, and these 2 women, they used to attend 2 different gyms. Oh, the same gym, but they had the same trainer. So these 2 women, they had spoken about an idea to start a soul cycle, mostly cycling basically. So they had spoken to it about the idea about the soul cycle gym to their trainer. This trainer brought them together, and then they started just one shop. They ended up
The
chain of everything. So I think that merging is an aspect of maybe you finding your founder, your CEO. I think that's a good aspect of. I don't know.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So basically, constantly looking for businesses.
Networks.
I feel in Africa, especially in Kenya, we have a ridiculous number of duplicates. You know, there are so many.
Me too.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
But if you can find a way to motivate these people to come together, then you can actually start building global companies out of it. Yeah.
Because I think if the goal is the same, we can do it. If we can do it together, it will be better than doing it alone.
Yes.
Yeah. So onto that point also, do you think that when a VC comes into now my startup, do you think that I should change my culture, or they should change their culture of their way of doing things, or should there be a middle ground on where we can meet together and say, okay, this is what we are doing, or who is supposed to change or who is not supposed to change?
Actually, I think this brings up a topic of how to choose a VC or knowing which VC to approach, because it's also important. Because if you look only at the monetary aspect, you might end up having a VC that doesn't really align whose vision of the company and the vision of the company doesn't really align. An example is like, who's ever heard of Angani? Is it Angani or Angaza? The Kenyan cloud company. There ended up being a falling out between the founders and the guys who came into the company as VCs. It was so bad, the CEO ended up being locked out of the company. His services were down for about 2 weeks. They were sued. The CEO and then the co-founder ended up leaving and starting another company. So I think you need to actually understand the VCs you're bringing on board. They are like, what is their attitude when it comes
what
to...
What drives them?
Yeah, exactly. What drives them? Their philosophy. What exactly the expected, their exit plans. How most of their companies exit. Do they really push for a certain type of exit? Do they really like hands-on management, or are they one of those types who like sit back and watch and give advice when needed? I think that's also another aspect you should consider. And probably also, instead of getting cash from the VCs, maybe you could consider getting a convertible note, because you give up less equity and whatnot. So that's something maybe think people should consider. Yeah.
It's interesting that you should bring up like the issue of a cultural fit between VCs and entrepreneurs. But then it brings up the question, the people who we share the same culture with, let's say like older Kenyans with money, are they really thinking about investing in startups? Do you see like a different type of cultural difference there?
I think what I can add to that question is models that we can create so that young people are integrated into the system. Because if you look at most VCs, they are older guys. So, and older guys are the ones who, in quotes, have money. So how can we integrate maybe the older generation and the younger generation into maybe being the sole owners of this VC company?
Like, we were talking about this earlier, and we came to the conclusion that it would be really, really nice if a group of young people with a very strong skill of communication and convincing people to check out money can come together and find these old people with money. It feels odd to say old people with money, but to find this the older generation of people that made the money, that actually have the money in this country, and convince them to actually give them the money and hold them accountable for it. You can't expect someone who has his whole empire built on real estate, for instance. They have land, they have buildings, they have hotels, all solid assets, tangible assets that they own, and they consider this their wealth. You can expect someone like that to start funding real estate. But I feel it will be much easier to convince someone like that to actually give you money and hold you accountable. And you now, as a company, work as VCs now. You are young people, you understand the tech space, you understand how to analyze if a business is successful or not. You can even run the merging aspect of it and monitor various businesses in the country and be like, you company A, company B, I feel like if you come together, we can fund you, and with both of your ideas, you can build C, a very big company. I feel like that will be a nice way to approach the problem of having VCs that understand the tech space.
I think another thing I would like to add on to that is sometimes it's difficult to sell ROI to someone who's 70 and might sort of retire or be senile or might pass on in 10 years or in 20 years. But you'll find the culture in Africa is one of passing on wealth from generation to generation within the family. So you'll find that a 70-year-old, maybe someone who's acquired a lot of wealth over the years and is about to pass on, will pass on the wealth, the companies, the ownership to their son or to their daughter, to their, grandson or granddaughter, whatever. But I feel like where we're headed in terms of succession planning is, instead of trying to convince that 70-year-old person, their son will probably inherit, or their daughter will probably inherit those companies and that wealth. So as young people trying to maybe start up advisory services or consulting companies to advise people on how to manage their wealth or where to invest their wealth, maybe we should be having that conversation with our peers, right? Because then the current generation that will probably inherit that type of, or that amount of wealth. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think that's
the time is now.
Yeah, that's the way to go. Because I think that we're the generation who's going to invest our wealth in tech. It's probably too late for the earlier generations. And do you guys think we can also do it organically, just to have tech money invested in tech? Because if you look at some of the largest venture capitalists, or even angel investors in, let's say, places like Silicon Valley. So these are the people who are building, like Andreessen Horowitz. So one of the founders, Mark Andreessen, built one of the first successful browsers, which was Netscape. And from then on, the ecosystem evolved around some of these individuals and the money that they invested. Do you guys think we need to wait, not exactly wait, but cultivate the wealth within the tech ecosystem, then reinvest it? What do you guys think about that?
Personally, I think there needs to be like a jump-off point, whereby after a certain period of time where the ecosystem has grown and evolved and companies are starting to show like a health balance sheet, they have like consistent monthly revenues and whatnot. So after that period of time, after that number of years, you'll get to a point where now there is enough wealth has already been derived from pre-existing tech companies. So, and since these people actually see the value in investing because they benefited from a tech company that was basically smaller. So these are the people now who will drive that investment, like you've said. So I think there needs to be like a period within which there'll have to be growth and a lot of value creation, and with that wealth creation, and then from that point you can leverage that wealth now to invest into the smaller tech companies or the budding tech companies. Like one of us said that I think it was you, we actually have to generate enough wealth from the tech space so that people can actually see value and validity in investing in that tech space. Only now this time it will be led by people who have actually benefited from it on the onset. Then now other people, like you say, the banks and whatnot will follow.
So are you trying to say that me as a startup, I have to make money in order to make more money? Let's say I have an idea and I want to execute it, but I have no money. Where should I go, or what should I do in order to I don't know, generate money?
Find a way to start to bring an MVP to market. That's the only way. You won't get funding without some sort of traction. It will be, especially in the local market in Kenya, it is impossible.
And what do you think is more important? Is it revenue or profit? Because you'll find billion-dollar companies like Uber are still not making a profit, right? So what can we as Kenyan entrepreneurs try and do? Is it gain traction in terms of users, or is it in terms of actual money?
Revenue.
And if it's money, is it revenue or profit?
I think at the end of the day, for every business has to go through the phase where they first of all need to derive revenue before they can actually gain profit. But that's actually a point where we need to start considering as a VC, do you really want to invest in a business that's only generating revenue? Which I actually really think they should. A business that has revenue, more probably than not, they have users. And right now we know that users are the actual currency, not even the profit itself. So if you can manage to leverage a business that's generating a lot of revenue, that means it has a lot of user base. All that's left is fine-tuning it to actually reduce on operation cost and maximize on profit. So if you have a business like this, it's easier to innovate rather than to actually start a new business altogether. So if you invest in a business that has revenue, chances are you'll generate profit eventually. You'll just tweak the management a little bit, not in management, the business model kidogo, and generate more revenue by reducing the operation cost. Like the way Uber is planning on introducing self-driving everything.
Right.
Yeah, to eliminate drivers who basically suck up all the money that they could be making as profit. Yeah, so that's what I'm talking about. Look to the future. You might start a business that not necessarily generating profit, but it's offering value to the society. And when you have value, you generate this is what we were using when we were discussing our company. Authority. Exactly. With revenue comes authority. With authority comes users, and with users comes money. So you can start investing from the very beginning. Yes.
And just to add on to what you said about startup companies trying to reduce costs, labor being one of them. Just taking it back to Andela as an example of a company that promotes remote work, or remote work is basically its MVP. You'll find that African developers are paid way less than engineers in the States or in the UK or in other markets. I think for me it brings me the question of, if I am a developer and maybe I've left Andela, for example, and I want to start my own company, chances are my salary or my line of credit or my personal savings are way less than that developer in the States who worked for some company and made hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years. So I'd just like to ask you guys, what do you think about compensation when you're working for a startup? Compensation when you're a developer operating in the African space, and also compensation if you're a developer who's found a solution to a problem but you don't have enough money because maybe your salary is hinged on your geographical location. What do you guys think about that?
I think it's a tough topic to discuss.
Is it?
It is.
But you should be discussing this tough topic.
Exactly. Exactly. So let me just start by saying that in any business, your key objective is to make profit. Yes, or at some point. So if I'm going to get developers who cost less, I'm going to do it every time. So adjusting for just the quality of my product. As long as I can get a quality product, I'm going to pay my people enough to keep them happy, which just so happens to be much less in Africa and the developing world than in other places. Just to play devil's argument, devil's advocate, there's an argument I've heard recently that the cost of living and the cost that developers in these other countries have to undertake put them almost on a, not exactly a level playing field, but it translates. For example, if I went to JKUAT and I'm currently living in Roysambu, I would have much lower costs than someone who went to, say, Berkeley, has hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, and is living in Seattle, like one of the 3 most expensive cities in the world. So yeah, it makes you really think. It's not a good argument, but I'd love to hear like what your thoughts are on that.
I do believe companies they are leveraging in the fact that cost of living in Africa is low. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not like them paying a lower salaries over here it's related to the income they're making. They're still making the same money. Maybe they could have afforded to pay $4,000 per year developers in there, $400,000. But knowing that in Kenya, paying someone $200,000, for instance, which is actually a very, very high salary at the current pay rates, which should not be that way, but it's how we are paid. Sindio, paying a developer here $200,000, that developer will actually live a very comfortable life in Kenya.
Yeah.
The cost of living here is low. So in a way, the devil's advocate thing again, you can feel like for them it's not wrong. It is wrong, but it's not. At the end of the day, you're still providing an above standard living.
But what I've observed actually is, what I've observed, especially on Twitter, is microaggression from developers. So there's one specific one called Ganga Chris Ganga. I think he's Kenyan, and I think he worked or is still working at Andela. But he recently posted this tweet where he said, when you appear in 2 out of 4 huge funding feature images, but you're still broke. Right? So I don't know how much Andela developers are paid, but I think, it was funny for a minute, and then it becomes
serious.
It becomes very serious and a bit sad.
Yeah.
So in as much as, someone may say the cost of living in Africa is low, I think for me, again, it begs the question that, what if I want to have a global career? What if I want to travel?
Don't I deserve a better salary?
Exactly. What if I want to attend tech conferences? If I'm only earning $400 a month gross, and then a ticket to maybe the States to attend the Afrotech conference in November costs $900, and then I have rent, and then I have to pay for travel and food and taxes. I mean, I think just in terms of dignified pay, would you say that we are paid in a dignified manner, even though you're doing remote work, even though you're working for a Kenyan startup or an African startup run by actual Africans? Like, are we really compensated enough to aspire to be better or to do more?
No.
Not really.
Yeah.
No.
I think
because in as much as you said you were talking about Roysambu, but maybe that developer in Roysambu aspires to work in Ghana, to work in Lagos, or to maybe go do their masters in another place. Can that salary afford them opportunity?
No,
probably not.
It will keep them grounded for a very long time. You can't develop yourself on such a low salary.
And then also, what you were saying about, in as much as it puts us at the same level, if you live in an expensive city, but you're being paid hundreds of thousands of dollars, based on your salary, you get a 401k compensation sort of system. There's a system, a credit system where you have actual access to a line of credit. I'm not sure we're afforded that same privilege here. So, I don't know. What do you guys think?
Another thing, to get back to what Kevin was saying, I think compensation should be based on the value you create, not necessarily the cost of living depending on a geographic location and whatnot, because the value you create for the company is still the same regardless of where you're living. And if you have a certain level of skill that is able to generate a certain level of value for that company, you should be paid in parity to that, or at a level that reflects that. So I think the argument of, let's say, this place has a higher cost of living and this place doesn't have a higher cost of living and whatnot, if we both bring the same value, I don't see there a reason why one party should be paid higher because he or she lives in a place where the cost of living is higher. They could move, or they could do something else. Yeah.
And one thing I would like to add on to that, and this is very non-tech related, but you'll find that especially in Kenya, there are a lot of expats who are brought in to work here or apply to work here and get the job offer, and they're paid up to $15,000 a month, right? And maybe these are people from Zimbabwe or the United States. And on top of that, they're paid a hardship allowance. Now, you'll find that people who work in the same companies earn maybe $400 a month. They live in the same city, but they're not paid that same sort of hardship compensation. So then, again, what do you guys think?
Well, what is hardship compensation?
Hardship allowance, for example, if you work at an NGO and maybe you're based in Somalia or Sudan or a country with a lot of conflict, there's a hardship allowance. I don't know how to really deconstruct it.
If the social comfort is different,
very low in comparison to what you're used to. Yeah.
For instance, if you live in the UK and the social comfort there is like jumping on a train, travel is instant, and there's shops for everything everywhere. But you come to Kenya and it's different. You have to travel 2 hours in traffic to get to your workplace. Hardship allowance.
Okay.
I think that's really, personally, I know someone whose boss gets paid like almost 10 times. Not actually a boss. Someone whom they're on the same level with, but the person is a foreigner. They're paid 10 times more than what they earn.
Yeah, that is a question to the Kenyan government. Is there a law to this? Is there a law to this?
I completely agree with what you guys say, but look at it from this perspective. Let's go away from tech. Let's look at a different field. Let's look at manufacturing, for example. So in maybe between the 50s, after the end of World War II, to maybe the 80s, Americans were ruling manufacturing.
Yeah.
But as soon as you discover that I can make maybe a car for maybe like $100 cheaper in China, like more and more companies started moving their manufacturing to places where the market allows you to spend less money. So it really is the same thing. Like the market dictates the price more than like how we would want it to be. In an ideal world, I honestly believe everyone should be paid
For their value.
for the value that you create. But if the market dictates that in developing countries you can get cheaper labor, it's going to keep happening. So I don't know, like just like we said earlier, like we really want everyone to be paid just in accordance with the value you're creating. So it's not only like an African thing, there's also like a gender divide in how much you're paid. I recently spoke to a friend of mine who, upon being offered a job as a data scientist at like a reputable company in Kenya, had to take like a 40% drop in 40% pay cut in her salary for a job that was being offered at like maybe $10,000 a month. So instead of like a massive raise she was expecting, she was being told to take a pay cut because she's both local and I believe because she's a woman, which sucks. But the market is a force you can't really.
I personally, I went through that same experience. Obviously, not in the same sort of level or qualification, but just as I finished Moringa, I got an offer to work for a startup, but the startup gave me an offer for an unpaid internship for 3 months. And so when I was asking them about compensation, they said that, oh no, we only offer compensation or a stipend to foreign interns. But because you're a local, it's a 3-month unpaid internship. And so I think this whole foreign versus local again, am I afforded that same privilege if I decide to go work in Ghana or in South Africa? Would I be paid? That's a question on its own.
Problem.
Yeah.
Do you find that in developed countries, the government will favor local? Well, if you're local, you're the one who gets the privilege. But it's weird that in Kenya, if you're local, you're the one who has to bite the nail and let the foreigner roll in money.
I think I can call this something. I can call it a talent bias.
Right.
They perceive that since you're from abroad,
you have more talent,
better.
and you are in. Let's be honest, their schools are much better.
Yes.
So they assume that you bring more value and your talents are much higher and
better quality.
much more efficient. But how can you prove that? You can't prove that until
Does that
you've actually
speak
done
about
that
our
job.
education system? Is it of poor quality?
It's
Are we
not
not?
even that, because what about the diaspora, right? So for someone like me, I also studied abroad
Yeah.
in really reputable schools, but because my passport is Kenyan,
Yeah.
I lose out on some form of compensation, which I don't think is fair, because you do spend quite a lot studying abroad. And not to say that you're entitled to any form of better compensation as a local simply because you've studied abroad. But if I don't think I would argue even in terms of the value of education, because there are people in Kenya who've actually studied abroad and come back, and they have more or less the same value or experience. So it's a no for me. It's a no for me.
On
I
that,
think it's a talent. I think it's just a talent bias. Maybe
Yeah.
it's a bias.
Yeah.
And then to add on what Kevin was saying, think about the market determining the rates. It's true. The market will always determine the rates. But I think a probable effect in the long term of Andela setting up in Kenya, since in Africa actually, the people who leave the cohorts eventually in the long term, these people, once they leave Andela and start working for, some are being recruited by these companies, so are being paid actually US level wages, but are still here in Africa. Others actually freelance or just work remotely for other companies at their
rates,
levels.
yeah.
So I think eventually the outcome will be that the minimum wage rate for payable to devs will actually rise as a residual effect. It will be slow, it will take time. The same thing that's happening in China. The wage rate is keeping on increasing. It's getting to a point where it will actually be just the same to employ people in the States as it is to employ people in China. So I think eventually it will get to a point where there will be a parity between them. It will take a while, yes, but I actually think the effects of Andela setting up in Africa, since the skills that the people will get once they leave that place will be world standard, and once they proliferate the market and they increase in number, especially as their recruitment drive increases, so eventually I think they will actually push the wage, the minimum payable wage eventually, because they'll demand more. You either work for, if you don't pay me well and you're a local company, why should I work for you and I can still earn the same from I can earn a higher amount from a foreign company and still work from home. So, and if you want the talent and you need to compete, and I'm thinking that local companies eventually will need to compete at a global level, you'll actually have to hire these people at the salaries they're demanding. So it will take time. And I think, in as much as it's not being reflected now, in the long term, I think an effect of Andela is actually raising the minimum payable wage for developers in Africa.
so in the same context of discrimination, who gets what, who do you, in the context of now VC capitalists, who do you think decides on this startup getting this amount of money, and basically who makes a decision on who gets funding?
I think it depends on
the structure of the company,
of the VC. It depends on who makes the decision, how they decide to invest in that particular company. Depending, maybe they invest in X or Z sectors, and maybe for sector X they're ready to commit a certain amount. For sector Z, it depends. Maybe in each series of funding they participate at different levels. So I think it depends on.
Melissa, you had a point on VCs in particular communities, let's say like a Latina community. Could you expound on that, on how maybe our numbers differ, maybe a black startups can differ from maybe white startups, on how they get?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there's the famous phrase that as a black person or as a person of color, you have to work twice as hard just to get half. So you'll find that there's a statistic that for every dollar a white entrepreneur raises, a black entrepreneur raises 26 cents. So, I mean, and you can only imagine what the statistic is for maybe black women or other women of color or people with disabilities who aspire to be entrepreneurial. So there's definitely, I guess, silent discrimination or institutional racism that takes place when people are seeking funding. And ultimately, people invest in people. People rarely invest in ideas. So I think the question to us is, how can we position ourselves as people who aspire to be entrepreneurs, to position ourselves to actually gain funding from different sources?
It's pretty clear that the models that for funding that are available to us right now are not perfect. So we need to maybe keep innovating around that. So I had a couple of ideas that seemed ridiculous to me at first. So I want to just hear you guys, your thoughts on this. So by the end of 2019, I think Andela already has like 1,000 developers on their campus. So we recently found out that they're looking to hire maybe 1,000 more this year. So if there are 2,000 devs at Andela right now, you think they could start like an Andela Chama and maybe raise like startup funding and stuff like that from people from the ecosystem who understand how startup funding works in Kenya. So just like your quick thoughts on that.
Like a sort of think tank.
No, not for ideas.
Right.
Like a chama. What if like people at
Like
Andela?
angel list for something close to angel, something close to angel list.
Not exactly. Like for example, at Safaricom, they have a number of groups where you can like all contribute your money, yeah. And then the Safaricom one, I think, is like a land buying company.
Okay.
So employees of the company form like an independent
investment
entity.
company.
Yeah, like an investment group. So if we have a community of techies that numbers in the thousands, I feel like they would be like one of the more powerful groups in terms of dictating how much money could be raised by Kenyan startups. Yeah, so if the guys listening at Andela, if you need a CEO, just holler at me. You know? So yeah, just your quick thoughts on something like
maybe
that.
to your point, maybe we can see alternative sources of funding.
Yeah, just so just quick thoughts on like.
I actually think
first one.
that falls in line with the aspect of networking, because if you have like it will be a way, instead of the way normal VCs raise funds, they solicit funds from high net worth individuals, then they pull the funds, then they create a fund, then they manage the fund. So I think it will be a way of getting funds from at a more localized level, or how do we call it, as in more accessible, because exactly because you see the average person, even if let's say they were VCs in Kenya, the average person doesn't have access to these funds. Even if you have the money, let's say you're in the States, you're a guy, you've made it, you have $2 million or whatnot, but just a normal person, you have the money, you have this money, yes, but even if you wanted to invest in a VC or to invest in a startup, you don't have the right networks, you don't have the right channels. Yeah, exactly. So I think that could work in a similar way, just that the amounts will be smaller, but these are guys pulling the funds together towards a unified purpose. So they create a fund or various funds targeting various things, then they manage it. I think the main challenge will be like having a clear roadmap on what the vision of the fund will be, or the entity will be, where exactly to invest in, the philosophy guiding it, the models they're using for investment, and things like that. Yeah. But I think that's a good idea. It's something that could work. Yeah.
So Melissa, any thoughts?
What do you guys think of crowdfunding campaigns? Do you think that's a good first step to finding an alternative source of income besides banks? Because as you said, banks only give you funding or loans if you have hard assets. As a startup, you're rarely afforded that same privilege. So what do you guys think of crowdfunding? Do you know of any successful crowdfunding campaigns that have taken place in Africa or in Kenya specifically? None?
just in terms of platforms, before we go into the campaigns, apart from Mchanga, is there really any other?
I mean, there's GoFundMe and then there's Kickstarter, but you'll find that a lot of these crowdfunding platforms, specifically in Africa, are usually to raise money for water or sanitation, or more altruistic
humanitarian causes,
activities, and not necessarily someone who's just come up with a product or a service in the tech space that could change people's lives, or So I think, maybe that's something to consider, crowdfunding platforms.
I actually think if you use crowdfunding, you can it's a way to validate your idea, to see if people actually find value in it or whatnot, and it's actually a way to get good feedback. Because if someone doesn't, let's say, contribute cash, let's say if you are rolling out products on a pre-order basis, so if they don't give the cash and you have a way to get feedback from them, you can actually get feedback from them, But locally, I don't think there's any company that has done a successful crowdfunding.
Does our government do any funding for tech companies or
the normal youth funds, but you know how those goes.
or the normal youth funds?
But actually, if you're speaking of the government, there's something. Your friend Mumbi. There's a question she had posed one day on, I think it was WhatsApp or my Instagram. What measures what initiatives can be done to make like the startup environment or the startup ecosystem in Kenya much more amenable to startups? Another thing I think is the aspect of regulation. Maybe there could be a regulatory sandbox whereby things like registration, taxation are made easier for startups.
Exactly.
Because I've gone through that process and it is hectic. It is tedious. So, and I think if you have an environment where like young businesses, because most of the founders of these businesses are also young people who are straight from school, don't have the knowledge on how to navigate the regulatory framework, and probably would rather spend any funds, if they have any, towards the business rather than spending it on lawyers. So I think it will make the process way easier and actually much more enticing if you have, let's say, an easier system whereby startups, let's say younger, between under a certain number of years or below a certain revenue threshold, having like seamless registration and let's even exempt from tax, because honestly
you can't tax a startup.
Yeah. So I think it will be, and actually think it could make Kenya a much more attractive destination to actually create a startup, and actually then build support systems around that. That could be a starting point.
I think that you should look at the charges for starting a business in Kenya right now. You will be mad. You will be very mad.
It's very tedious.
Yeah.
And then also in terms of, because I know sometimes when you speak about money, when you speak about funding, we speak about money. But funding or investment can also be in terms of social capital. So maybe as a question to you guys, what spaces in Nairobi specifically do you think are providing a sort of ecosystem where entrepreneurs or developers can meet up and just bounce ideas off each other? I really like Nairobi Garage. I love the space. I love the people, the community. I mean, I think it's just a very healthy space to just nurture your idea and then also be productive at the same time. Do you think that has any importance? Do you feel like, for example, a lot of these co-working spaces are expensive, or are they affordable in your opinion? Should governments, for example, subsidize, I guess, the cost of working in a sort of space? What are your thoughts on co-working spaces and social spaces for developers to brainstorm and to just, I guess, expand their networks?
I really love what they are doing at the Nairobi Garage and similar spaces like the iHub, which was like one of the pioneers in Kenya. What would be maybe like, if I was really nitpicking, like they're not really as close to the developer communities as they need to be. So maybe like some of the organizations in Silicon Valley and why they had like such high growth was catalyzed by like their proximity to maybe, let's say, Stanford, Berkeley, and all these places. Maybe it skipped my mind. Maybe I just haven't seen it, but I've never seen any of these communities organize events maybe with the schools and stuff like that. There's more cooperation now between the hubs and maybe, let's say, like Strathmore, but there are thousands of developers, let's say maybe in like maybe the University of Nairobi or even Jomo Kenyatta, which could help catalyze the growth of these communities. So if they just they're all holed up on Ngong Road, and environs,
But is that a pointer to the schools or to the co-working spaces?
I think
because are the schools really open to collaborating with outsiders? Should it be upon the schools or the public universities or private ones? Because the private ones may be money motivated. It would be a point of what does this institution have to gain from this? And then the public ones, maybe there's a lot of bureaucracy that doesn't really foster innovation or partnerships. Or is it upon, iHub, Nairobi Garage, NILAB, to actually go and seek out different students from those universities? What do you guys think about?
Personally, I think for when it comes to that for the schools, I think a school like an example take Strathmore. I think it has done a really good job of making it creates a space whereby guys can make and break stuff. You build, you try, you test, you try again. With all those innovation hubs there, either
IBs, Beehive,
exactly.
WebHive,
There's IBM, there's
Liquid
Telcom.
There are a lot of spaces there. So I think since most of the campuses or universities in Kenya are public, I think it will be an initiative now, probably also of the government, to make sure that it encourages that aspect of like inquisitive research and playing around with things and breaking things and making things and like trying being more. The problem with Kenyan education, it's more theoretical and less practical. So if it actually centered on actually tackling real challenges and problems, I think it will actually make it much more conducive. Because I think you go to in places like Stanford and whatnot, you find that guys are building projects that were part of like that they needed to graduate. Then you find that these go on and translate to businesses and whatnot. Or like how the Google guys met. It started off as a research project and then it evolved into a business. So I also think that there's also normally that aspect of cultivating an environment of research and actually learning for the sake of finding out new things or growing knowledge is actually not like nurtured and fostered in Kenya. It's mainly of get your paper and go find a job. But there isn't that actually real inquisitiveness of trying to come up with new things and innovating new things. So I think if that were to happen, or if there were spaces where people could do that, it could be because it also doesn't have to be government works slow. So if people who are key players in the ecosystem come together and say, okay, so we can do this and this. Let's say we need a space to do X, Y, Z, where people can come, bounce ideas off each other. So it's like a melting pot of ideas and whatnot. So we find that, and there's the space, there's the talent, and there's the equipment that they need to do that. I think it will be a starting point where people can, try new things and nurture skills and ideas. Yeah.
Just to add on to what you're saying in response to Melissa's question, you're completely right. The public universities are more bureaucratic, and you just find like the whole culture of the academic institution is just to show authority, like I am higher than you. We once tried to organize an event where we had entrepreneurs and a couple of just professionals. So we're trying to compare being hired as a professional to being an entrepreneur. And actually the day before the event happened, like one of the people in the hierarchy of the school just decided that this is not going to happen. So seriously. So I had to call all this like the high level employees at Google and Facebook and sound like an idiot. So it's an issue to do with the schools, but I've never felt that government and its structures are like a firm force behind enterprise. Like on a high level, maybe let's say like what the Kibaki government did with landing the fiber optic cables in Kenya. On a high level, like you can depend on the government, but in terms of like really engaging with people, I think
the grassroots.
Like, the people within the ecosystem, like the developers and people like that, and also in partnerships with the hubs, need to like create more spaces for for like the people who are just coming up to speak and talk about their ideas. So like in connection with what I was saying earlier about like alternative sources of funding. So another idiotic idea I came up with is like amnesty for people who invest stolen public funds in startup. So like a fund where 100% of the funds that you've stolen still belong to you if you invest it in a startup. So it's
No.
I get
motivate theft.
Yeah.
So if someone is
He
investing,
hasn't finished his point.
if you invest in a startup,
Wow.
and that startup is going to make profit, and you as an investor, obviously you are entitled to it. It's sort of giving thuggeries in the government. Yeah. It's giving them a way to clean the money.
You're
Yeah.
funny.
Yes,
Money laundering.
It's money
I
laundering. It's a
completely-
clean money laundering. Yeah.
I completely get your aversion to all of this.
However,
So when I first thought of it, I was like, Kevin, that's really dark. But think about it this way. Yeah.
But they're already stealing it.
All money is tainted, in some way. And it's already happening on such a large scale, on a massive scale in Africa. It's just that there's no way to track it. But if you actually quantified all the money lost in Africa through like embezzling of public funds that's being invested in like ridiculous ways, if they can honestly buy like wheelbarrows at $1,000 each, like how far really are we from letting them invest in legitimate businesses? It creates a precedent where it's like, go steal, but look, they're already stealing so much of it, it's ridiculous. So I was looking at this hashtag on Saturday. It was just these governors.
At these governors.
Yeah. So with these governors, it turns out that a lot of not just governors, but let's say public officials in county governments. There was one county where like a young governor employed like 250 young women just so he can ogle and look at them. Honestly, guys, like so much of this money is already being used in ridiculous ways. So I feel like this would be one way in which we can recover some of this money. Like the systems are already broken. This is just like a way to put like sellotape on a broken bucket. Yeah.
But I think that's
we're trying to not steal
that's
in
not
the
a
first
long time.
place.
That would be counterintuitive when it comes now to solving the problem of corruption. And
Let me try it.
Creating another
Let me try
problem.
this one more time. If you guys still don't see it,
First of all,
I'll
it's
just let
starting
it
at
go.
the point of
It can
stolen
work.
money.
Let me
It can
tell you,
work,
It
yes.
can work if
Yeah.
you can find a way to completely patch corruption on the other end. At the end of the day, it's just, okay, you've already stolen the money, just spend it.
That's the starting
But
point.
you see, the problem is, with the way the system is right now, they can still steal some more. So if they can steal some more and they have a way to clean it, then they just keep stealing
Yes.
and cleaning.
so unless you're fixing it from one end, then giving amnesty to these guys to come in and invest their cash.
but my question is that sustainable?
It's not.
Okay. Let me try it one last time.
No.
Don't quote me on this, but look at what happened with let's say cocaine money in Miami in between the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So apparently from the documentaries I've watched, it was a dead town. Like there was really nothing there. There were just a couple of, like some retirees who were just going there to like lay in the sun and wait for the sweet embrace of death. So after like the cocaine boom, where like 80% of the cocaine that was coming into the country was all coming in through Miami. They built around 360 banks in the state and like built lots of real estate that to this day has built an economy that is many times of magnitude larger than the country that's Kenya. So yeah, in that case it worked and it was dirty money. So I don't know what
If I may chime in.
Yeah.
Sorry guys, Leo.
Late as
again.
usual.
Okay, so
Late
if I may chime in, cool J. If I may chime in, no? So you're right about Miami, but the thing is, you're missing the mentality that goes behind corruption. So this guy comes in and steals money. That's quick money that is not worked for. That mentality does not invest the money. So he won't invest in a startup. That's why even in Miami, the things you're talking about is the real estate, which they needed to spend houses, and the luxury market came in, and banks, because they needed to bank the money. In other words, things that went around the drug trade, right? So things that go around corruption is just foreign banks. Because they've stolen the money, they know it's illegal, they want to stash it away. So they're not going to invest. How I would approach it is, if you're caught in corruption, your assets are frozen, and that money becomes government property, and government then diverts, say, 60-70% to young people. Because if you're stealing in corruption, you're actually robbing the youth. You're robbing their future. So then, if you're caught in corruption and you're found guilty, your assets are frozen, the proceeds of corruptions are seized by the government, and 60% of it is directed towards startups and youth-owned enterprises and female-owned enterprises and stuff like that. And then 40% maybe geared towards development and government expenditure and stuff like that. That I think would work. But to say that the person who steals by his own volition can gain in amnesty that is him admitting he's corrupt in the first place. He's not going to do that. He's a politician. He wants to be re-elected. So what he's going to do is hide the money, try as much as possible to make it not known, and he's not going to spend it anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I completely agree with what you're saying. It sounds much better than what I was suggesting. The problem that I would see with this is that sounds like the initial pool of tax that you already had, and the problem was like people stole the tax. Yeah. So what's going to stop them from stealing again when it's found on this other end? Yeah. Do you understand? So yeah, if you're listening and you have a suitcase full of money under your bed right now, just reach out. I'll show you what you can do with it.
And it also brings me to the point of this whole play Kenyan music, because you'll find investment, it's not just not going to startups, it's also not happening in the creative sector. So I think there's a bigger sort of systemic underlying issue that's taking place. And I recently had this conversation with a Kenyan musician. He's a rapper actually. And he was saying that the thing about, why bongo music, which is Tanzanian genre, is booming so much is because of the drug trade. So you'll find that the drug dealers in that sector, that according to him, not according to me, according to him, the drug dealers are the ones funding artists. Mm-hmm. But the music is so good. Like everything. I mean, there's so many great Tanzanian artists doing great music videos, great tours, and they're actually sustaining a livelihood. So it's just, are we really going to get to a point where we need dirty money? I don't think so. I don't think that has to be the source of funding. What do you think, Leo?
Yeah, okay. You've
the Tanzanian in the house.
the way you put it, we need dirty money. It's actually, you're right. We don't need dirty money. But here's how I put it. Drug money is dirty money. Corrupt money is clean money misappropriated. There's a difference. I don't think corrupt money is dirty money. In this way, let me put it this way. So, if I come and steal from you, okay, and you recover what I've stolen, and you tell me, you know what, you've stolen from me, it's been years, right now there's nothing, say I steal a car or a school bag, that's a school bag, you're like, right now I have nothing used for it, what you've stolen from me, I am giving it to my son who's going to school. It's not dirty school bag. It's something I'd stolen from you. Money taken through corrupt means is funds stolen from us. And most of the time, they are robbing the youth and they're robbing the young. So when we say we take that money, which you've stolen, we bring it back and recover stolen goods and appropriate it to the people you're actually robbing, it's not dirty money. But yes, as far as the music industry in Tanzania and drug money goes, I think that's, in the current market, that's not so. Because with our amazing president, Magufuli, drug activity has reduced extremely. My goodness, that guy is working. we have a really brilliant president, and he's made drug activities almost nil. So I think that that maybe could have been the case previously. I wouldn't know, but right now, I think maybe they used it to leverage, and now they make good music, so they don't need it anymore. But I don't think right now drug money plays a big role in the Tanzanian music scene.
Yeah. And what do you guys think about the Play Kenyan Music sort of hashtag? To bring back the point of, it's not just about funding tech startups, it's funding any sort of
Kenyan
innovative sector, and creativity and innovation go hand in hand.
I tend to disagree when play Tanzanian music or play any music, to disagree with it, because the world has become so small that you just need to play good music. If I create an application that allows your information to be stolen, you are not going to use it because I'm an African and you're an African. You need an application that factors in your information and the security of your information for you to be able to interact with my application. So if you make something good, in the world of today, it's starting to become rarer and rarer that, let's look at M-Pesa, we always use it. If you make a good application, it doesn't matter. If you sing good songs, I have seen, there's a song by Sauti Sol. I have seen people commented, the one where they sang with a choir of a certain school.
Kuliko Jana.
Yes, Kuliko Jana. I have seen people, I'm actually in UK, I don't know what they're saying, but my goodness is song. You get what I'm saying? It was good, it transcends language, it transcends barrier. If it's good, it's good. So instead of saying we play Kenyan music, why don't we say
Play good music.
Play good music.
But do you think that sweeps talent under the rug, especially the people who get to be heard? Because just by virtue of the fact that you've mentioned Sauti Sol and not any other Kenyan, I mean, I feel like they are, at least in this debate and this discussion, the sort of gatekeepers of the music industry. And they're getting a lot of slack for not sort of holding the hand of other Kenyan artists the same way Diamond is in Tanzania. You know, he's been able to sort of nurture, is it Rayvanny or Navy, Kenzo or whomever. It's just, but do you feel like we are, it's the same thing about social capital, whether you're in tech, whether you're in creativity. If you're in the tech space and you're not attending meetups, for example, you're not meeting other entrepreneurs who've been there for like 20 years and someone who just left uni a year ago, and you're not trying to foster that collaboration, I think it applies also in creativity. If you're Sauti Sol or Nyashinsky or whomever, and you're not trying to sort of nurture the talent or mentor an upcoming artist, will keep having the same problems even in the health sector, in the automotive sector, in every other sector. So I don't know. I think it's very tricky.
I also think there's a you see, when you make it in a certain way, you kind of become a prisoner of your not success, of your path. So if you look at, for example, Sauti Sol, they weren't unheld. They came from nowhere, did a song at Java, is it Nikupeleke Java, it kind of hit. They built from there. If you look again at Nyashinsky, they came as kleptomaniacs. They even had beef with Bamboo. There's a time it's like they rap like him, and so he started calling them, Nyashinsky Boo, Kolobu, they had that beef. Nyash went to States, people, he battled rumors, people were saying he's taking drugs, then he came back and he still removed. So you become a prisoner of your path, right? Now, if you look, for example, in the Tanzanian scene, most people got there through the shoulders of others. It wasn't really, you do it with your own grit. Most people were carried. That's why you find Diamond carries people, because he himself was given a lot of, leeway by other people. So,
but I would argue that Sauti Sol, for example, a lot of people argue, not just myself, but good management has also plays a part in getting them to where they are. Of course, talent is a fundamental, it's a basic. You need to be talented. You need to have good music. But just drawing parallels between good management in music and venture capitalists in tech, that sort of hand-holding maybe is what we all need.
Yeah. The thing about the Play Kenyan Music hashtag, I think the context behind it was that Kenyan DJs, Kenyan radio guys, they're not playing good Kenyan music. Like there's this, I think his name is Andela. Using that hashtag, he just displayed like a whole list of bad Kenyan music. Joe Mushiri on the other side, he listed 10 good Kenyan music. As in, good Kenyan music can be played, but not at the expense of, you go to a club on a good night, 100% of the show is Nigerian music. Where is the Kenyan music? That is the context that Kenyan artists were saying. DJs, the people who are supposed to handhold these people, the DJs, the radio presenters, the record labels, there's no support. And also us in the IT industry, in ourselves, a few episodes back, Melissa was saying we go into these events where like Coke Studio Africa, and also an app like Spotify wouldn't have happened because of just us developers creating it. It had to have the artists. It had to have all those people who are putting this content inside. So what I'm trying to say is that every Kenyan product, I don't know what I'm trying to say.
I know what you're trying to say.
But in the Kenyan context, like, let's handhold each other. If you're a Kenyan and you produce good content, not at those things that Christian Andela was putting on his page, get good Kenyan content, push it to the world. Either way, good things will
sell themselves.
Yeah, exactly, will sell
I
themselves.
agree 100% with you, but there's one problem. But one problem where I take a step further. I'm a Pan-Africanist.
Yeah.
And the reason being is that these lines were drawn and I inherited them from people who aren't mine. The reason you're Kenyan and I'm Tanzanian has nothing to do with our ancestors, has everything to do with our oppressor. That's the reason I'm Pan-Africanist. That's the reason I have no problem with Nigerian music playing or Kenyan music or Tanzanian
Listen,
music.
I have no problem with Kenyan, Nigerian music, but let us also put the Kenyan in that context.
Yes.
Narrative.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in other words, I agree with you 100%. Play good music. Play good
Period,
Kenyan
yeah.
music.
Yeah.
Don't be biased towards
Exactly.
a certain region in Africa.
Exactly.
In other words, don't be tribal within Africa. We are actually really just one people with lines that were drawn. That's why you find, for example, my tribe is in Malawi and Tanzania. There's no way we decided to do that on our own. It is somebody who drew a line and didn't consider us. The Maasais are in Kenya, Tanzania. You have a cousin and you need a visa to visit them and you can see their houses right there. Why? You need a passport to visit because people drew lines. So also we should start thinking more Pan-Africanist.
And just in the line of, so in order to get funding or to get support, whether that's financial support or support from the masses, or even to gain critical mass, if ultimately you need to actually create a good product, maybe we can deconstruct what good is. What's a good product to you? I feel like a good product to me is something that's customized to my needs, something that makes, again, as you were saying, good, fast, or cheap.
Yes.
So maybe we can all just,
Yes.
What's good to you?
Yeah.
For me, good, we would say something that adds value in the sense I can use every day. Makes things very efficient and seamless. Makes things easier. Affordable, like you've said. What else? Yeah, that.
I'm sorry, guys. I think I'm a bit slow on this question.
No, I
You're
think
supposed
an
to list
example-
your own understanding
An
of what
example,
good is.
okay, you can give an example of maybe an app that you've been using of late or a website that you've come across that you feel is good
Like
for you.
Are we talking strictly software experiences or just
Anything,
any product
anything
in
good.
general?
Any product.
Anything good.
So for me, what I'd consider good is anything that offers convenience for starters, value, but I would not necessarily put the cheap aspect in it because you also need to understand that good is almost never cheap.
Quality.
Yeah, so quality. Yeah, I can't put the price aspect of what I consider to be quality. More often than not, if you compromise on price, quality goes as well. So just offer convenience and value. I consider it good.
Me, say good would be something that answers a question or brings a solution better than the rest in whatever field, in whatever venture. So let me put it in the context of artists. If I am feeling low and you produce a song that ups my spirits, When I listen to it, I feel good. If I need introspective and it's a song that has a deep meaning, if it's an application I am using, I need to communicate with somebody, I can do it well. It answers my need, what I need to do, so I will use the tool that does that best.
So relevance.
My G, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think to make good comes with the level of familiarity almost. I need to be able to understand what I'm using quickly without having to like do research and stuff like that. I don't know how else to explain it, but it just needs to be snappy, yeah? Like I can quickly latch on to
Simplicity.
exactly. So simplicity, yeah.
For me, I'd say maybe accessibility. For my example, I'd use Uber. If I want a taxi at this moment, I can just request for it. Maybe accessibility for me. And all those other points that everyone has said.
So, I tend to think that as a natural response, somebody will go with what is familiar till they meet something that convinces them to break all barriers. So either it is such an amazing application to this person that they throw all natural instincts out the window, but in terms of if it's good enough or just good, yes, people will naturally go with, familiar faces. But in terms of venture capitalists in Africa, I think we have the money and the capacity to finance ourselves. And this is what I mean, okay? If you look at the industrial age in the West, they didn't have many venture capitalists. Many aristocrats didn't even finance it. They just had an idea and sold it to the masses. We have over 70% of our population as young people. We have over 1 billion people, projected to reach 2 billion people. By 2050, I think, the East African population in the EAC is projected to be 500 million people. That's the population of Europe right now. In other words, what I'm trying to say is we do not need venture capitalists. We need mass market ideas. Ideas that appeal to many people and leverage our population and leverage things like data. We can sell data science and stuff like that. So leverage usability, our user base, the fact that we're many. Kind of use the China way. They never really got financing. They just leverage their people. So when you leverage and you bring in something called economies of scale. So you don't need to charge, for example, 7,000 per bag of cement because you're selling many of them. You can just have a small profit margin and it's cheaper and it's mass marketed. So I think if we look at it in terms of producing applications that are geared towards the strong suits of us as Africans, we'll rely less on venture capitalists at the beginning, and by the time they'll come in as investors, we'll already have a certain base that they cannot ignore us. So people will put money where money is growing. So if we can leverage that to grow in the beginning, we won't need them. When we need them, if we want to maybe scale globally, we'll have enough money, enough cash flows to show and justify the fact that when you put here, you make your money, and it doesn't matter whether I'm white or black, you'll put your money where it will grow.
Amen. So thank you guys for listening. This has been a really nice episode. I hope you've learned as much as I have. And if you have any questions or any ideas that you'd like to share with us, we have an email in your social media so that if anyone wants to reach out to you, maybe they can get to you. Mine is on Twitter. My name is Michelle _Atieno, MICHEL_Atieno, if anyone wants to reach out.
Just search Kevin Ahere on all platforms, especially the Andela people with whom we started the Chama. Just reach out at Kevin Ahere.
Okay, I'm at Tigani Leo on Twitter. I'm not 12, so I don't have an Instagram.
Ouch.
Vicky _Ireri, double K on the Vicky, without a Y, VIKKI _Ireri.
For me on Twitter, it's Ubermensch Z.
What?
We leave that in the caption.
And on that bombshell.
That's a place to end.
next week.
Okay, so thank you, Eugene, for coming in as a guest. We hope to have you as a regular contributor.
Can I come next week?
For sure.
This was fun.
Definitely.
For sure.
Thank you, guys.